I'm honestly sitting here thinking of how I want to introduce this video, and I'm trying not to cry because I'm kind of a crybaby. I miss making Magic content, and I'm back! I think that this is the longest time since the start of Constructive Criticism .com that I haven't made Magic content. It's possible that my break after leaving CCMTG was longer, but I think that I was still making YouTube content at that time, if I remember correctly. And so, for me, like, this is the biggest one. And I was trying to decide how I wanted to do this time around. And I decided to make it part of Mythicast and announce the return of Mythicast and kind of the things going forward. So, hi, if you don't know and you're watching, I'm Spencer. I am the host of Mythicast, two-time Utah State champion in Standard, which people like to make fun of me for saying, but I like it. And longtime Magic content creator and owner of ConstructiveCriticism.com, producer for tons of Magic podcasts. And I'm back, and I'm excited to be here. Before we get too far into this, and before we get into kind of the point of why we're here and what's causing this return, I just want to mention our sponsor really quick. If you get a chance to check out our sponsor, Grave Making Games, please do so. They sponsor most of the Constructive Criticism Network, which we'll get into at the end of the show, but they mean a lot to me. They've been really cool. They were really inviting on taking on the entire network for constructive criticism. And as the owner and the person that tries to help get sponsorships for all of the shows on the network, it means a lot to me that they were so willing to work with almost all of us. So yeah, go check them out. You can use the code Mythic10. That's capital Mythic. The whole word is capitalized 10. And you can get percentage off your order. And it kicks them back to us on the show, and it means a lot. So, thank you so much to them. They're pretty great. I personally have used them to get booster packs on the cheap. It's actually pretty nice when you get like the pre-release pack stuff. It gives you the booster packs. They count towards your next wild card. It's pretty sweet. I would check them out. They also have really cool cosmetics, stuff like that. If you want to support the show directly, we have relaunched the Patreon. So if you go on to patreon.com/mythicast, you're able to support the show. We'll be looking for awesome people to give us insight into things that they want to see to improve that, and some more benefits to come very soon. So today I'm going to be talking about the deck that I went and got Mythic with this month, which is Mono, Red, and Historic. But before I do, I just want to announce kind of the things that are going to be coming to Mythicast. So we have a return of the show coming. I just want to thank everybody. We have, I think we had one patron when we left. Huge shout out to him. Huge shout out to just the listeners that have stayed engaged with the Twitter and things like that. I went through a lot the last year, to be honest. We all have, and I needed some time away to get ready to move. If you noticed, I'm not in my same space anymore. I'm in a new space. I'm here in my new home that I love so much. And I have a very sick wife who's about to have a baby in July, and I needed time to, collect myself, to step away, decide where do I want to be in Magic? Where do I want to be in content creation? It was important to me to do that, and I really appreciate the listeners who stuck by me. People have reached out who knew what I was going through, and it really does mean a lot. And I just want to give a special thanks to Michaela because, Michaela and I live really busy lives. We both have full-time jobs. We're both parents. We're both married, and we've been really understanding of each other. She's the exact co-host I needed. I knew the second that I talked to her, and she'll be back. We're going to talk about that, but she has been amazing and understanding through all of this. I'm just going to give her a huge shout out. She bought my family dinner the other day. We've been so busy. Things have been so crazy. She means a lot to me, and I just want to give a special shout out to my co-host, Michaela, who's not here this week because I'm kind of doing this on the fly, and I gave her permission to kind of do an episode without her, but she means the world to me on how kind she has been, and understanding that, I started this podcast, she had stuff come up, and then immediately after she had the stuff she was going through, I had stuff come up, and it goes to show that the strength of the relationship that we've already built as friends. And I think she's pretty amazing. So I just want to give her a special shout out. We will be back. We're going to talk about an 8-week, what we'll be doing for the first 8 episodes here at the beginning of June. So I think we're talking either June 6th or June 7th or something like that. And then we'll immediately start podcasting after that. We are looking for guests. So if you want to be one of our Mythic guests, don't forget to tweet at us when you get that rank of Mythic and when things are going great for you over on the MTG Arena side. Yeah. I think that's about it. And let's get into this mono red deck. Yes, I said mono red. I know that red white is a little more common right now. The mono red's not really at the top of the standings, but I almost played mono red through an entire run to Mythic. I had not been playing Magic, started out in Bronze, and just kept going. I just kept winning. So we'll be right back on the other side to talk about this mono red deck. Alright, let's go over this deck. I'm really excited to talk about this deck that I did achieve Mythic with this month, and kind of the run that I had, and talk about what I learned about the deck. So the first thing that we have is we have 4 Bowmat Couriers, 4 Get2 Lava Runners, 2 Grim Lavamancers, 4 Soulscar Mage, 2 Pillar of Flame, and 2 Shock. Our 2-drops are 4 Lightning Strike and 4 Vishino Pyromancer. And then we have some of our bigger quote-unquote spells in 3 Bone Crusher Giant, 4 Light Up the Stage, 4 Wizard's Lightning, 2 Hazaret, and then our lands, we have 4 Ramunap Ruins, 15 Snow-Covered Mountains, and 2 Faceless Havens. So the first thing that I want to talk about is kind of how this deck wins. And it wins the way that a traditional mono-red deck wins, right? You're trying to be fast, grind them out with burn spells, and reach. But I want to talk about kind of what you're hoping for here. And I think the first thing that I want to talk about is that you're hoping, as you would guess, to lead off with a 1-drop. But you're actually hoping that it's one of these specific 1-drops. You either want it to be Bowmat Courier, Soulscar Mage, or Grim Lavamancer in Game 1. It's fine if it Get2 Lava Runner, but Get2 Lava Runner being able to get haste and surprise your opponent after a Wrath of God or a Day of Judgment, because for some reason both of those are in this format, along with like a bunch of other Wraths, you typically actually want this to be one of your later cards to present recurring damage later. The same thing can be true of Grim Lavamancer for what it's worth. You basically only want to lead it on Grim Lavamancer because it enables Wizard's Lightning, which then enables, Light Up the Stage. But those are the 1-drops that you kind of want to lean on, and then Grim Lavamancer also is just better in more matchups, I think, than Get2 Lava Runner is, even though you never board out Get2 Lava Runner, so, I don't know. Either way, you're trying to lead on one of those 1-drops, and then you typically want to follow that up with an attack, and either a Light Up the Stage or a Vishino Pyromancer. Vishino Pyromancer coming in and dealing damage immediately and being able to, deal damage to something like a Narset is actually pretty great. I thought this card would be, one of the worst 2-drops. I thought I'd like Karizev better. I thought I would like just tons of different 2-drops better. But the fact that it's a wizard, the fact that it, just presents damage is just a body. I don't know. It overperforms in this deck for a card that is seemingly should be unimpressive. Once you've kind of done that, the deck actually has a good amount of card advantage of reach. Kind of from whether it's Bowmat Courier, Grim Lavamancer for reach, your burn spells, Light Up the Stage, getting a 2-for-1 with Bone Crusher Giant, reach from Hazaret, or just Faithless Haven and Ramunap Ruins. You have a lot of reach to kind of push through those final few moments. I want to go over some key cards really quick. First up, I want to talk about Bowmat Courier. This is the best card in the deck. I did not expect to be saying that, by the way, coming into this. I thought Bowmat Courier was a little bit cute. And I don't know, I've always kind of felt that way about Bowmat Courier, but it is definitely what this deck needs. The thing is if we just pull up, our breakdown of the deck details, right? We have 18 1-mana cards. 4 of our 3-mana cards are basically 1-mana cards. So we're at 22 1-mana cards. And because of that, and because you're able to so easily clear the way for Bowmat Courier, you just... Oh, man, it's even more than that, right? Because Light Up the Stage also basically costs 1 mana, so it actually puts you 26. Either way, you end up just really being able to empty out your hand, clear your way for Bowmat, and then just do it all over again pretty often. And for game 1, that's really important. Bowmat does a lot of work. You're typically going to try and get, I mean, even if you just get 1+ card, I've had that happen a lot where that was enough. Especially, like, it really helps you when you're getting flooded. Where, like, you're just like, okay, I literally have had times where I had 3 lands in my hand, sacrificed my Bowmat for 2 spells, and ended up winning the game. It's really that good. And honestly, the deck kind of needs it. Like, our creatures are super mopey. Outside of Bonecrusher Giant and Hazaret, our creatures are tiny. They're so small. And, you know, when they're so small, I like small. I think that's a funny word. But when they're so tiny, it I don't know, it makes it hard to push through damage in certain matchups. But the fact that Bowmat is able to kind of get you card advantage and then let you try and help you reset the board, it's pretty important. Next up, I think the second most important card is actually Soulscar Mage. It really helps you when there are large creatures, when you need to push through a lot of damage. Having multiple Soulscar Mage in play, and then just casting a spell like Shock into Light Up the Stage, you just deal a lot of damage really quickly. And it also makes your Shocks and your Pillar of Flames honestly not look as horrendous as they really are in the format. It turns them into real interaction, and also real burn spells. Like, it turns them into lightning bolts in a lot of ways, in a lot of different matchups. So, Soulscar Mage kind of comes in to help you with some of the problem child cards, as well as just this ability to push through damage really, really, really quickly when you have a really good draw with them. The last card I want to talk about is Hazaret. This is a card that I board out a lot, but is really, really important game 1. And the reason that's really important game 1 is that you need a way to close out the game quickly in game 1 and put the fear of, the fear of God, as we would say for Hazaret, just into your opponent. And these could be Chandra's. I mean, you could play a Chandra in the main deck for what it's worth, but these could be Experimental Frenzy, which we'll get into. But Hazaret on the play in game 1 is just unbelievable. There's just so many decks that the second it hits the board, they're just like, oh, I'm dead. Like, I was not prepared for this, and I need to pack it in. And I don't know that Mono Red is even a top 10 deck in Historic right now. In fact, I think it's safe to say that it's probably not. But my win percentage was pretty high with this deck, and I think that the fact that you can surprise so many people in game 1 with just sheer number of spells that you get to play per game compared to them, and then finish it off with, a Hazaret or things like that, is pretty amazing. And also the fact that, like, Hazaret lets you tussle in combat later with very large creatures, discards cards to deal extra damage, gives you extra reach. It just kind of does a lot for the game 1 that I think is pretty important. Next up, I want to talk about the mana. We obviously have, 15 snow-covered mountains. We've got our Faceless Havens and our Ramanop Ruins. And, you would think, like, that the mana is just the mana, right? It's mono red, but there's a lot of things that kind of go into this. If we look here, we have 21 lands. And I think that when we talk about the number of 1-drops we have, right? We have quite a few lands. It's a lot of them, and the reason for that is just 100% Faithless Haven. I want to talk about this card because I think it's really good in Historic. I think that the number of Wrath effects that you're going to run into, the number of just blue decks that have a really hard time beating this card, you'll actually see that I have another one in the sideboard for when I go up on 4-drops and stuff like that. I think this card is pretty insane. The fact that it's 3 to activate, you can then tap it for mana post-combat because it has Vigilance. It also counts as a wizard for your Wizard's Lightning. Like this card really fits well into this deck. I honestly, if I could have given you key cards that weren't lands because of the way the show notes are written, this would be key card number 1. I think this is actually the best card in the deck. Faithless Haven fixes a lot of problems that I would typically have with a deck like this, and just pushes through so much damage. Even the threat of it being on the board makes your opponent play so much differently. It also makes you sequence your lands really interestingly, where like I'm always going to lead on double snow-covered mountain before I ever play a Ramunap Ruins if I have the chance, just because I want to be able to activate Faithless Haven as soon as possible, even if I'm not going to do it, just to threaten it. Like, that's how good the card is. The next land that we should talk about is Ramunap Ruins. The fact that you can just continue to cast your red spells off of it. I don't know that there's many matchups where you care about paying life. I have had multiple games that I've won, like probably 4+ in that Mythic run, maybe more than that, where I had double Ramunap Ruins. Like, I just didn't even care about the life that's being paid, and just the ability to push through was so much more important. It made my opponent cast spells to try and stay in the game. So yeah, I think Ramunap is just an easy add to the deck. Obviously, Ramunap Red, a lot of these cards in this deck are a part of that deck. So I want to quickly talk about some really cool interactions in this deck. The first thing I want to cover is double Bowmat, because there are probably people who are playing Historic that don't know this. But because of the way that this card is templated, there are times where you can sacrifice both of your Bowmats. So, if you see, it's hard to show because if I move the mouse, but basically if you see where I don't know if it's a colon or not. Anyway, if you see where this ability ends, right? The discard your hand section on this card. Also, if you're listening on podcast form, you obviously can't see this. But basically, discarding the card, your hand is part of the cost of Bowmat Courier. And so because of that, you can actually sacrifice both Bowmat Couriers, put their abilities on the stack, and draw all of those cards together. And that came up a lot when it got into the Platinum and Diamond ranks, where that's how much card advantage I needed. I really needed to sacrifice both Bowmats and kind of start the game over for myself to get enough burn spells to close out the game. And that is a pretty important key for this deck, I think, is the ability to do that. The second thing that I want to talk about is Soulscar Mage and Grim Lavamancer as a way to really take advantage of the non-combat effect on Soulscar Mage. On the reverse, though, it's really important to understand how Grim Lavamancer and Gitu Lava Runner interact, because if you don't pay attention, your Lava Runners either lose haste when you want to get an attack, or they lose that power. And so both of kind of understanding the balance between this interaction is also really, really important. The last thing that I kind of want to say is the card that I am probably the least impressed with, but somehow almost never gets cut all the way, which is Bonecrusher Giant. This card is... It's so funny because you play against I played against the Fog decks a bunch in Silver and Gold, and because of that, Bonecrusher was just MVP. They would cast a Fog, and I'm like, oh, well, all right, you're dead. Good job. But outside of that, the card is kind of mopey. The 4 power, there's just a lot more 5/5s and 6/6s in Historic when it comes to big creatures. But it does its job. It is uninspiring but good, and I just wanted to kind of quickly cover it before I moved on. The next thing that I want to talk about is the sideboard. While I do that, if you're watching on the video, I apologize that I'm doing this deck tech this way. So I've just done deck techs recently. People have preferred it happening inside of MTG Arena, and I apologize that the sideboard looks the way that it looks. That's not my fault. You can go Yellow Wizards. But I'm gonna read off the sideboard really quick. But before I get into this, if this video gets 25 likes on YouTube, I will post in the comments a complete sideboard guide for the first 10 matchups on MTG Goldfish, as well as I'll accept writing additional guides for other comments on the video. If it gets 25 likes, I will go out of my way to make a really detailed sideboard guide. We're going to talk about some sideboarding though. So we have 2 Frostbites, 2 Abrades, 2 Rolling Vortex, 2 Rampaging Ferocitons, 1 Chandra Torture Defiance, 2 Experimental Frenzies, 1 the Akron War, 2 Ox of Agonis, and 1 Faithless Haven in the sideboard. The sideboard is actually really good. I was shocked as I was building and changing the sideboard how many of these cards could come in. I believe that I boarded in every single one of these cards multiple times, some of them a lot. And that there's still room for this sideboard to grow, and to, as the metagames evolves, there's tons of cards that you can play in your sideboard, whether it's Magma Spray, whether it's Lava Coil, or more Crone Wars, or Phoenixes, or, I mean, there's so much good red sideboard cards. There was a Soul Guide Lantern in the sideboard for a lot of my Mythic run. There is a lot of really good sideboard cards available for mono red. I want to talk about some sideboard plans really quick. There are decks like Gruul, where you're going to board in, stuff like Frostbite to kind of have bigger removal, and a Braid for Embercleave and stuff like that, as well as just kind of Chandra. And then depending on if you're on the player or the draw, things like that, you have Experimental Frenzy and the Crone War. And those type of matchups against Gruul or the Mirror and stuff like that, you kind of just want to... It's really played draw dependent. So, for example, I actually really don't like Hazaret in this deck on the draw very much. I think that while you have a ton of 1-drops, right? And in some matchups, maybe that's not true, but in most matchups, I would rather just be this Experimental Frenzy deck than a Hazaret deck on the draw. It's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because they both want you to have no cards in your hand. But the thing is that this card does nothing if I have cards in my hand, whereas this card just pops off no matter what. And so because of that, the player of the draw really dictates which of these kind of cards that I want, and that actually is true in the aggro matchups too. Like, if I'm the control deck, I want Experimental Frenzy. And I actually don't know how often that I had Hazaret on the play. I mean, that's not true, because I think Gruul and the Mirror and stuff like that, you want it, but anyway, we're getting pretty far into the weeds there. Against control, the sideboard was pretty insane. In fact, I would say that most of my wins in the entire Mythic run, I mean, I think that the ladder was pretty full of Jeskai in general, but, Rolling Vortex, 2 of those, the Experimental Frenzies, and the Crone War, and the Faithless Haven come in for the Pillar of Flames, the Shocks, and the Hazarets. I think that's actually just straight up what it is. We have 4, 5, 6. We have 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. You just straight up, that's how you sideboard. You don't even change player of the draw. I think that I won 100% of the matchups against Brainstorm outside of Phoenix decks. Like, that's how good Rolling Vortex is specifically. The card is actually insane. Maybe you want more of them. It is unequivocally the best card in your sideboard. Rolling Vortex does so much work against blue decks, against just random... you can board it in against the mono white deck. The card just puts in a ton of work. Against kind of the mid-rangey decks, like whether it's Jund or... I mean, Gruul almost falls into this, kind of depending on their build. But, you have things like a Braid. You have things like Frostbite, Rolling Vortex. And it just kind of really depends on the context of what you've seen. Obviously, here we see that I still have 2 Ox of Agonis in my sideboard. These are actually specifically for the Rogue deck. But you actually have Grim Lavamancer in the main deck, which helps with that matchup a lot, so it kind of just depends. But yeah, I had 3 Oxes during almost my entire run until I added the Crone War, and, I only ran into the matchup a few times, even though it was, a pretty popular deck a few weeks ago. But yeah, that is the sideboard. That's kind of what different cards are for. I think the only thing we didn't really cover was Rampaging Frostodon, but that kind of comes up in the creature mid-range matchups and things like that. So overall, I think the sideboard is really strong. I think that, if you just kind of go... I'm going to pull up Goldfish really quick to cover this, but if you look at what is considered to be the best deck right now, you have Gruul, Selesnya, and then obviously you have the Orzhov Lurrus deck. I think you're pretty good against the Lurrus deck. I think you have a ton of game against the Gruul deck. And we will get into this in just a second, but I think you're a complete dog to Company. I actually don't think you can win. I think it is a punt matchup. There's some cards to consider moving forward. The first thing that I want to talk about is is, depending on the format, you need to consider Phoenix or Ox. I think that if Rogues becomes super popular again, they figure out different things that they can do. Those are cards you need to keep in mind. I think that the other thing that I would consider, and almost changed for the deck tag without testing it, I almost think that these Frostbites or something else should be Lava Coils. I think that it's either Lava Coil or more of the Acrone War. You need cards to deal with large creatures. Not just outside of Gruul, but like I need something that's going to deal enough damage that I can get an attack in multiple times against 5 or 6 toughness creatures. And the thing is, the Soulscar Mage really does help with this. So I need something that does a lot of damage. I honestly wish Roast was in this format. Like, if I had Roast, I would just put 2 Roast in this deck sideboard. But that's not a thing. And then the last card that I want to talk about to try out is Oncrop Crasher. This is actually a card that was in this deck quite a bit. I actually would not hate if you just straight up took this list, cut a single Bone Crusher Giant for one right now. I actually don't think that would be that bad. But it was really, really bad in the early run of Mythic. It wasn't until later. I cut it. I had Karizevs in the list too. But I think Oncrop Crasher also fixes a lot of the problems that I just mentioned, where it removes things like, large creatures from combat, so that you don't have to care about them as much. I actually straight up, if I play this deck again, I probably will cut that Bone Crusher Giant for a Crasher. But yeah, that's kind of the cards that I would look to. Really quickly, I want to talk about just the overall view of the list, though. The decks that you want to play against the most are easily Brainstorm decks that are not Phoenix. Elves, Jund, mid-range decks. I don't hate the Gruul matchup very much. I don't know if that's because, I'm a Gruul player by heart, and so I just understand what I don't want to see on the mono-red side, or if the matchup's actually good. But I don't think I lost to Gruul at all. It felt pretty good, to be completely honest. You're just able to easily deal with their oozes. You're able to do things the right way. And then I think there are a couple decks you don't want to see. The first one is surprisingly Phoenix. I thought that would be a good matchup. And I don't know if it's because they're playing, and for what it's worth, Lava Coil could help with this again. So, just saying. I don't know if it's because they're playing the large creatures, like Crackling Drake and the 3/3 that gets bigger, but that matchup's hard. You get them to a really low life total, like 4 or below, and then they just kill you pretty often in one turn. And I don't really know how to fix it. I did start losing to it more when I cut out things on my sideboard, like I mentioned that I had the artifact that exiles their graveyard. I don't know. There are certainly things that you can do, but the matchup is not as good as I thought it would be. And then Green-White Company is both bad, and so bad that I think you have to drastically change your deck to beat it. Things like playing the Crasher, things like playing more Acrone Wars. And even at that point, their creatures just outclass yours, and they have Collected Company. So you need... I have won the matchup, and it involves Experimental Frenzy almost every single time. But the thing is that the deck already is going to board in things like Night of Autumn and stuff like that against you. So it's kind of rough. The last thing that I'll say is that the deck certainly needs something. Whether it's cutting a Grim Lavamancer from your main deck to play a Chandra in the main, and then cutting the Oncrop Crusher to play, or the Giant to play non-Crop Crusher. You do need things to deal with some of the larger threats that you're going to deal with inside of Mythic. But I had a lot of fun on this Mythic run. I'm not sure why, to be honest, but I was pretty proud of this Mythic run in that, I have not played Magic for a while, and I am not a great mono-red player. It was actually a focus of mine, I think, a year, it's hard to remember because it's 2020, but a year and a half ago, to really improve with these style of decks. And I learned a lot and improved a lot as I was going, to the point where I think I lost 2 matches in Diamond 1 and just won the rest. It was a good run, and I learned a lot. And I'm a person that suffers pretty badly from ladder anxiety, and I didn't feel that as much this time. So that's going to do it for the deck tech. It was fun to talk about. I really enjoyed this deck. I really enjoyed the Mythic run. If you want to be a guest on the show and talk about a deck that you had a Mythic run with, don't forget to tweet at us with your Mythic pick and the deck that you're playing so that we can sit down and talk with you. Typically on this part of the show, we would answer questions from the audience. I didn't think it would be fair because it would have just all come from my Discord or the single patron we have right now. But in the future, head on over to the Patreon. Those will be this will actually be, by the way, the priority order on how we answer questions on the show. It will be patrons first, Discord users second, so the Discord link will be in the show too, and then we'll post on Twitter that we have questions coming up as well. So don't forget to follow the show there too, and that will happen whenever we have a guest, as well as sometimes we'll do mailbag episodes too. So just kind of stay tuned for when those style of shows come up. But to wrap up, I just want to thank everybody for your patience with this show. It's been a roller coaster. From we had an early host that quit, into me hosting, into me finding somebody that I really thought would be a great host, to him quitting Magic, to me hosting again, to taking a break and going back to CC. It was all pretty intense. And this show's had a wild ride, but there are some pretty dedicated listeners and to this show that I really, really appreciate. Don't forget to check out the rest of the network. I don't know if you guys know, but Sam Black is on the CCMTG network with Drafting Archetypes, the show that I help produce. It is absolutely amazing. And the stuff that Abe and Mason are doing over on just actual constructive criticism is great content. You should check it out. They're crushing it. Just as well as Common Knowledge and Homeward Path. I'm probably missing a show. There's too many shows on the network, but there's just some really cool stuff going on. You can follow me at Spencer13H. You can follow Michaela at Mythic Michaela, and follow the show at, I think it's MTG Mythicast on Twitter. So don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a review if you're listening on podcast form. And like I said, if we get 25 likes, I will write up a full sideboard guide and post it in the comments. Thank you everybody so much. Thank you to our sponsor. Thank you to our patrons. Head on over to Great Viking Games or patreon.com/Mythicast. And goodbye. Enjoy. Let me know if you have any questions with the deck. I will be highly responsive in the comments. And we'll see you guys soon. Probably, under a month. Under a month till the full return of the show. So thank you so much. We'll see you guys next time.